And as Giram mentioned there, youth unemployment remains a huge problem. Let's dig into this a little more with Babatunde Omilola, Head of Development Planning and Inclusive Sustainable Growth at the United Nations Development Programme. One of the targets set by the African Union, and I think the UN as well, is to try and eliminate youth unemployment in Africa by, I think, 2063. But given the hundreds of millions of young people that are unemployed across Africa, I find that a very difficult target to believe.
Yes, this is possible, and I think the African Union can get this done if we really harness the demographic dividend that we currently have on the continent of Africa right now. But to answer your question, let me say that we have to understand the challenges that we are currently facing on the continent of Africa. We have a continent of around 1.2 billion people, and there are 420 million young people from ages 15 to 35. And 35% of these young people who are women do not currently have opportunities in terms of employment, and 20% of them who are men do not have opportunities in terms of employment opportunities. But at the same time, what we know is that if we do certain things properly, we will be able to educate African young people and then provide employment opportunities for them. The first thing that we need to do is we have to unleash the entrepreneurship spirit among young people in Africa so that we build their skills, we capacitate them in a way that they can engage in the labor market on the continent. The second thing that I think we need to do is to invest in our young people on the continent of Africa by investing in their health, investing in their education, investing in their standard of living, thereby creating that human capital development that we need on the continent and be able to provide quality jobs for young African people. For us at the United Nations, we are not just talking about employment opportunities for young people. We are looking at opportunities to create decent employment opportunities for young people so that what we have been experiencing in the last few years can stop. Many young African people are migrating, and many of them are dying in desert, and some are even dying in the Mediterranean Sea. Last year, we recorded around 5,000 people dying in the Mediterranean Sea. This is unacceptable, particularly when you look at the opportunities that exist on the continent, opportunities in labor-intensive industries such as agriculture, construction. So what we need to have in place on the continent will be sector-specific reforms that can be able to help us.
These are huge things that you're talking about. I mean, these are endemic problems. Admittedly, I don't speak to perhaps as many young people in Africa as you, but people I speak to, there's no shortage of entrepreneurial spirit. There are plenty of startups across Africa. One of the things that keeps coming up when I speak to young people in Africa is infrastructure. They just can't get around. It's very difficult. You talk about migration. It's very difficult to find employment opportunities in other countries in Africa in the same way that perhaps people in the European Union have, for example.
What needs to be done on that will be free movement of labor on the continent of Africa. And that's why the African Union passport is a welcome idea. Hopefully we can have this by 2018. If we do not have free movement of labor, goods, and services within the continent, it will be very difficult to provide that opportunities for young people on the continent to thrive.
And how much do you think that will help if this visa, you're talking about this so-called sort of Africa passport that would allow people across Africa to move across borders in the same way as people do in the European Union? How much is that going to change things if this does come in by early next year?
It's going to change things a lot because people are on the continent, many young people, they have skills, they have abilities to be able to contribute to development, not only within their own countries, but also within countries on the continent. So if they are able to move freely, they can transfer their different skills in different places and contribute to development. So free movement of labor and services, very critical on the continent. Without this, I think Africa will not be where it should be when you look at Agenda 2063.
And very briefly, Babatunde, is that for you the #1 priority, this visa-free scheme, eliminating borders, or are there more pressing reforms?
There are many other pressing reforms on the continent. First and foremost, we need to have investment, core investment in young people in Africa, especially young ladies and young men on the continent. If we do not have investment, if we don't invest in our people, will not be able to get that kind of quality labor force that Africa requires right now.
We'll have to leave it there. Babatunde Omilola from the United Nations, many thanks indeed for coming on the show. We appreciate your time.